Hey, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up with unit number 12, The Great Society. Now we talked a little bit, of course, in lesson 1 about, JFK and the assassination of JFK. Well, in 1963, in November of 1963, when JFK, of course, is assassinated, his vice president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, or affectionately called LBJ, becomes president of the United States of America. And his great society, of course, is birthed at that particular point. What we're going to do is look at the unit focus questions. Then once again, we have 4 unit focus questions for this particular unit, which we won't address now, but we will at a later date. Identify and describe Kennedy and Johnson's domestic and foreign policy goals, trials, and accomplishments. Identify the origin, major players, strategies, and accomplishments of this modern civil rights movement. Describe the impact of the Vietnam War on American life and politics, and what impact did the civil rights movement have on other underserved and unrepresented groups in America. The vocabulary, once again, we tell you to go ahead and take your journals out, of course, and define these terms for yourself, and we'll try to address as many of them as we go over them, of course, in the lesson. The lesson focus question, we have 2 for lesson 2. How was Lyndon Johnson able to calm American fears after the death of JFK? And what were the components of LBJ's Great Society? Well, we'll begin with a do now activity. Take out your journals and at this time and write this particular topic down. Is eliminating poverty an achievable goal for any democratic society? At this time, go ahead and write your responses, and we'll be back in a few moments to check and see what they are. Well, in looking at it, that particular, journal activity, what do you think? Is it possible to eliminate poverty altogether? Well, Lyndon Johnson, of course, seemed to think that it was. A lot of, conservative, presidents of the United States of America may not agree as much as some of the Democratic or the liberal presidents of the United States of America would probably agree. But if you remember, back during the progressive movement, they believed that the government was in a better position to do anything about solving social ills like poverty. So some people would argue that if in a democratic society, poverty can be eliminated, it's going to be because the government takes a big role in doing so. The election of LBJ. LBJ became president through tragic means, but his election cemented him as the leader by mandate, and Congress was obliged to notice. LBJ was elected by a landslide in 1964 because of the embrace of JFK's policies and the extreme conservatism of the Republican candidate, Barry Goldwater. LBJ's popular support aided his support for his agenda, the Great Society. Now understand something. LBJ, of course, becomes president of the United States of America initially because of tragedy, the assassination, of course, of John F. Kennedy. And with that, he gains a lot of trust from the American public. The American public wants stability, and they see LBJ as a stabilizing factor. And that's why in 1964, because he embraces, Kennedy's agenda, and he is a stabilizing force, he's elected president of the United States of America, a year after the death of LBJ. Here's Barry Goldwater, who ran against LBJ in 1964. He's a Republican senator from Arizona. And because of his staunch conservatism, he didn't receive as much support. And because of that, LBJ, of course, wins the election of 64 in a landslide. LBJ's Great Society. LBJ convinced Congress to pass the initiatives created by JFK to complete his legacy, and Congress obliged. LBJ, to his credit, instituted his Great Society, which utilized aspects of the New Frontier coupled with his own legislative agenda. The heart of the Great Society was to end poverty, expand educational access, provide health care for the aged and infirm, and the passage of the Economic Opportunity Act was aimed at improving economic opportunities for the poor and disadvantaged. LBJ created the Volunteers in Service to America, which we call VISTA, which was a domestic Peace Corps to help the urban and rural poor. Upward Bound was also a program created by the Great Society. When you look at the programs created by the Great Society, what it was about was bettering America, or bettering the opportunity for American citizens, especially the underrepresented, represented, and the poor. That's one of the things that endeared LBJ to Americans. Here you have a slogan, a logo for VISTA. It was aimed at young Americans with skills in poor and urban areas to help people overcome poverty. And this was kind of LBJ's nod to the Peace Corps created by JFK. Accomplishments of the Great Society. LBJ's Great Society was to start a war on poverty, created entitlement programs to improve the lives of Americans in education and healthcare. Some people celebrate the programs today, others criticize them, stating that they have made Americans depending on programs, creating a permanent underclass of citizens. Entitlements, of course, are those things that we have today, like Medicare, Medicaid, and also in looking at even Social Security. A lot of people look at that, of course, as being an entitlement. Great Society programs and accomplishments and acts in question are Medicaid, Medicare, Head Start, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the Food Stamp Act of 1966, Immigration Act of 1965, the creation of HUD, and the Department of Transportation as cabinet posts. So when you look at LBJ's Great Society, he does a lot to change the landscape of the American political arena. At this time, what we'll do is pause the presentation and allow you to copy the bubble map on the Great Society programs. Once you have completed this activity on the Great Society programs, make sure that you turn it into your teacher to be graded. Good luck, and we will see you in a bit to review your answers. But at this time, go ahead and copy down the bubble diagram, and we'll be back in a few moments to give you some time to complete it. All right, you should have had enough time, of course, that you were able to go through and complete the bubble map, of course, on the Great Society programs. We hope you turned it into your teacher as you were instructed to do so. And what we'll do is give you a brief explanation of what some of those Great Society programs were, and maybe give you a brief explanation in terms of what they were about. The first was Medicare and Medicaid. Now, as a part of the Great Society, one of the things that Johnson wanted to do, he wanted to eliminate poverty. And one of the things that he felt like that most Americans needed more than anything was to make sure that they had health care. So if you were a person that was 65 years or older, you got Medicare. And if you were a poor person or somebody that was able, you could get Medicaid, where you could get access to medical care. And then you had the two landmark civil rights decisions, of course, with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed any kind of discrimination in public places. And then, of course, you looked at the Voting Rights Act, of course, that that expanded the right to vote to people, of course, who had been denied the right to vote. Hope you had an enjoyable time looking at those activities on the Great Society programs. And if you didn't do as well this time, better luck next time, and I'm sure you'll do fine the next time around. Lesson focus question. We had two lesson focus questions of lesson 2. How was Lyndon Johnson able to calm American fears after the death of JFK? And what were the components of LBJ's Great Society? Well, when you look at it, how was he able to calm American fears? He promised American stability by committing his agenda to mirror JFK's agenda, essentially picking up the mantle that Kennedy created. In other words, they voted for Kennedy in 1960. And because of Kennedy's popularity, and then because of his tragic death, a lot of people, of course, wanted to see that agenda, of course, come to fruition. And LBJ allows that to happen. And because of that, he garners the trust of the American public. What were the components of LBJ's Great Society? Advance civil rights, end poverty, provide educational opportunities to the poor and underprivileged, and provide health insurance to the poor, aged, and infirm. Well, that was the Great Society in a nutshell. We hope you were able to gain some insights as to why the Democratic candidate, in this particular case, LBJ, of course, continued the legislative agenda of Kennedy, and we hope that you gain some insights in terms of how the country, of course, is involved to become a little bit entitlement driven to some degree. So what we want to do, of course, is give you an opportunity, of course, to look at LBJ's perspective and after the death of John F. Kennedy. But remember what we said, don't take my word for it, do your own research, do your own reading, draw your own conclusion, and with that, we'll see you next time.